So the 426 meeting, that was at a time when the Larkspur Station Area Plan was on the forefront of our consciousnesses. Wind Cup was rearing up, and it's not rearing anymore. It's not quite done yet. Anyway, those kinds of issues, that construction, making us all worried about development in the county. So we focused a lot on potential for development in the Ross Valley, in this Greenbrae corridor. And this is what I heard coming out of that meeting. You know, I heard that this community, just like the greater Marin, really is a place that respects community character and community values. And we also are a community that has long used thoughtful perspective planning to support those values around community and community character and neighborhoods. We also value our open space and our public lands and our agricultural heritage and that industry out there that so much defines West Marin and then also has become such an important player in terms of providing us with locally grown foods. So the combination of these values has guided our growth patterns throughout most of the county for decades, and it's strengthened our communities, and it's resulted in the preservation of about 85% of land here in Marin County. In perpetuity, they're either parks, preserved open space, or agricultural lands. We are very fortunate to live here. It's an incredibly beautiful place because of the planning that was done in the past. So as a result, Marin County has been a very slow growth county. We have grown at less than 0.5% a year. It's more like 1/3% a year since 1990. It may not feel that way because we are really feeling the impacts of, one, a booming economy, locally and regionally. We have about 40,000 more jobs here in Marin County today than we had in 1980. We also, the Bay Area has grown from 2 million in the early 70s to 7 million today. And we have people commuting through Marin County. We have people in Marin County commuting out of the county. We've got a lot of regional traffic. Plus, we're all driving more, so we have a lot of local traffic. And then we're also experiencing a school-age boom, so we have a lot of school-related traffic. So the traffic crunch is really stressing us all out. I know that I'm driving more than I used to. I know that I contribute to the problem, but I also know just generally, we're a very active community. We have good transit, but frankly, it doesn't have a free access to move around, so you don't get to move through the county any more quickly getting on transit than in your own car. The culture tends to be still around driving. We have beefed up bike and ped. Infrastructure to make it safer. Some people are choosing that, and that's a great thing, and we need to continue on that trend. But it's crowded out there, and we're stressed out. It's a quality of life issue. And I heard that loud and clear. The other thing that I heard around that crunch is, as we think about housing and growth in this community, we've got traffic, we've got a drought that makes us really aware of our finite water supply. We are blessed with an incredible system of reservoirs that takes good care of this community and has from the, back in the 60s and 70s we had a serious drought and managed through that with the pipeline that brought water from the East Bay, but of course a different situation now that this is a general statewide and actually western region drought. But we're thinking about water because it's a finite supply. And we're wondering, can we handle more growth with regards to our water resource? We're wondering, can we handle more growth because our schools are so crowded? We're feeling the crunch there. And so generally, that's the heightened concern. So then, lots of stuff, rumors swirling around about potential development that might happen in the Ross Valley. And one of the things we talked about in April was the fact that, one, there are no plans for any significant development other than the remodels that come along on single-family homes. We have very little vacant land. We are built out. We are built out in Marin County for all intensive purposes. I have a map right over there and it shows the zoning for the Sir Francis Drake corridor. All that yellow represents single-family property that's zoned for single-family residential. It is virtually all built out. We have in place a Kentfield Greenbrae community plan that has mapped out the way we have developed in the Kentfield Greenbrae area. It was first put together in 1985, I believe, and it has stood the test of time. It basically lays out how we're going to grow, and that's how we have grown. We also have a strong county-wide plan that reinforces, again, the community values that you see reflected in that zoning. We also have very strict local code and building regulations that regulate height and parking and standards and setbacks. And those are the tools we use when proposals for any kind of a project come along, whether it's a new single-family home or we can't do an apartment, but that's what would go. We have tools in place. We have local control. That was one of the themes of the meeting in April. And though there are people that discount that, I can tell you with assurance that, frankly, the tools are in place. No one tells us where to build or how to build or when to build. And that leads us to the housing element. So, right now, so the housing element, and I left that, you've got a sheet on your chair there. Every city, town, county in the state of California has been required to put together a housing element as part of their general plan, and the general plan is another requirement, state requirement. So every city, town, and county must have a housing element in place, certified housing element as part of their general plan. And what a housing element is basically an outline of a jurisdiction's ability to accommodate community housing needs in the future. And so it's not a dictate to build, it's basically a jurisdiction, like a county, looking at the unincorporated areas of Marin County and identifying where is there vacant land or underdeveloped land that is currently zoned for housing that is not fully developed. So it's identifying where there's opportunity for housing without rezoning. The number of housing units that a community is supposed to plan for, not build, is determined by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They determine the numbers by looking at growth patterns, expected economic development, etc. Those numbers get handed down through ABAG and come to the cities, towns, and/or county. These housing elements are put together on an 8-year cycle. So we do this every 8 years. We have to plan for a certain number of housing every 8 years. The coming cycle is for the period 2015 through 2023. And during that period, the County of Marin, for the unincorporated areas, must show the state where are there opportunities for the development of housing that would accommodate 185 units total throughout unincorporated Marin. Okay, so that's, are there vacant lands or underdeveloped lands in unincorporated Marin enough to accommodate at least 185 housing units? That's our target this cycle. The last cycle, that went from 2007 to 2014, we had to plan for, not build, 773 units. So the numbers come way down for this cycle. And then if we look at that last housing element that went from 2007 through the end of this year, 773 sites identified, or sites that would accommodate 773 units. The proportion of them that were actually built, a fraction, single digits maybe. It's evidence, and you can look back over through the housing elements, that a housing element is not a dictate to build, it's not a predictor of growth, it's not a prescription for growth. It is identifying for the state, is there room for community housing needs? And this is across the income spectrum. This is for your low-income seniors, your most vulnerable, all the way up to single-family residential. And if you look at development patterns in Marin County, you'll you'll see that the bulk of the development that happens in unincorporated Marin is single-family residential, and likely the same in our other communities as well. All right, so that's what the housing element is. Where we are in the process is, let's see, we started, planning department started this update process in the spring in March. And this comes right on the heels of us tying up, finishing up the 2007 to 14 housing element, because that took a while. And so we're actually able to use that last housing element as the base for our new housing element, and very little change is likely to happen, except now we don't have to identify as many sites, so we can bring the number down. We had 5 community workshops spread throughout the county. Then there were 2 planning commission hearings, one in August and one in September, I believe. Then the planning commission made a recommendation on the housing element, and they said, okay, programs, you know, that's fine. And then they made a recommendation on sites, and they recommended, and I think it was a split vote, and there was different opinions on what the mix should be. They recommended a housing element, a draft housing element, that identified sites for 503 homes versus the 185, and it is in their discretion to do so. The Planning Commission is a group of citizens. They're appointed by the supervisors. They represent people, they represent communities from throughout Marin County, and their job is to review documents like these and policies like these, make their recommendations that eventually come to the Board of Supervisors. So Planning Commission does a housing element update, makes their recommendations, and identifies 503 sites that would accommodate up to 503 residences, and that went up to HCD for what's called a preliminary review. And this is standard practice for housing element updates. You send the housing element up to the state just to make sure you don't got any deal breakers in there, so you have to go back to square one. Housing element, or HC took a look at it, has now sent it back to the county, and the Planning Commission is going to hold one more hearing on the housing element, and that is going to be on November 17th. They will look at it one more time. They can tweak it again. They can make big changes or little changes, but they have the discretion to work with it some more, and then take a final vote on their recommendation, and we'll send it to the Board of Supervisors. Board of Supervisors is going to hold 2 hearings, I think, one in December, tentatively the first on December 9th, and I don't know when the second one's going to be. And we will have a chance to take public input, to look at the housing element as recommended, to make any changes or accept it as it is, and then we will ultimately make a decision and vote on adopting the housing element. So, contrary to what you might have been hearing or reading, the housing element, draft housing element, which again is not a dictate to build, it's an identification of where there's opportunity to create housing, but the housing doesn't happen unless the property owner wants to try to do something, and then it goes through process. So it's a plan identifying where you could do new housing for the community. It's not done yet, and I suspect it will look different when it finally gets through the rest of the Planning Commission process and the Board of Supervisors. It will probably look different than it does today in terms of not only the number of sites, but also the composition. My guess, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what I would guess. So it's not a done deal. It's a work in progress, and I'm happy you all can take a look at it. Provide your input, go to the public hearings, talk about the programs. Housing is really important here in Marin County. We all know how tight the market is. It's one of the consequences of the planning that we did that preserved so much open space, has made it a beautiful place to live, and also we don't have a lot of supply, and for good and for bad. I mean, there's trade-offs in the planning that was done. So as a consequence, though, we have seniors who are getting priced out of housing as rents go up. Our kids, our young folks are having a very hard time staying here unless they stay with us. I have one of those. So we do need to think about housing. We need to think about housing for our most vulnerable. We have very, very hard to hold on to food homes for our folks that are dealing with mental health challenges. landlords, you know, the best landlords in the world are feeling the pressure to up their rents, and who can blame them? So it's important to be thinking about housing, and if this community, the broader Marin County, wants to try and should be trying, do we want to take ownership of our housing needs? And if so, how do we do that? And I think this community would say yes, and I've heard you all say yes, we should try to be creating some housing, especially housing for our most vulnerable, those in need, but it needs to fit in the community. There's no proposals in place in this community right now that I'm seeing for any new housing development, but I do hope that you're all thinking about how can we do better as a community, taking care of our own even, let alone folks that want to move here from someplace else. So let's see. Kind of got off script, and I'm sorry to be talking so much. Let's see. Okay, just to wrap up on the housing element, there are 2 sites in District 2. My district is District 2, all the Ross Valley, plus it goes over the hill into, if you think of the Bret Hart, Lamita Park area of San Rafael, which is Woodland Avenue, Auburn Avenue, I don't know if you know that area. There's one site there that's included in the last housing element and in this housing element as proposed by the Planning Commission. It is a strip of land right along the Smart Railroad tracks across from the Lamita Park neighborhoods, and it currently has zoning for multifamily affordable housing up to 50 units. I think it's almost 2 acres. With the Levine bill that just passed and changed our default density for housing, for affordable housing from 30 to 20, that's Mark Levine, our assemblyman, and Joan Lundstrom's here, Joan Lubomirsky's here, and she works for Mark. Anyway, it was an important bill because it allows us now to, when we do try to do any affordable housing projects, we can use a density that's much lower. It's 20 units per acre versus 30. So that bill will affect the Cal Park site should anybody decide they want to try to do a project there. But again, go through the public process. So that's one site that's in the housing element. The other one is way up at the other end of the Ross Valley in Fairfax. Visualize Sir Francis Drake and Oak Manor Drive. There's a little strip mall there with a 7-Eleven and a garage and a Round Table Pizza. That site has been zoned for many years, mixed use, residential, commercial. It also has an affordable housing overlay that's been in place there since the early 2000s, and it's included in the housing element for up to 10 units of low or moderate housing. So those are the 2 sites in District 2 that are at play. And I expect to be talking about them if they're still on the list when we get to the Board of Supervisors discussion on the housing element. Okay. You're very patient. 3 quick traffic and congestion relief initiatives that I want to bring to your attention. You've probably read about or heard about, I mentioned at the last meeting, the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and opening up, trying to open up a 3rd lane going eastbound for the PM commute. This was identified as a key need and an area of emphasis when we were talking about the Greenbrae 101 interchange project. That whole conversation, one of the results was fix the Richmond Bridge first. Also look at a 101, direct 101 580 connection. The direct 101 580 connection that might happen in San Rafael is a very long-term project, but we need to go there. But it's not going to happen anywhere near overnight. We are all going to be much grayer or having our hair colored much more often by the time that happens. But in the nearer term, we can and do now have the consent and funding in collaboration with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, Contra Costa County, the Transportation Authority Marin, and Marin County, all working and have agreed that opening up a 3rd lane eastbound on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge is necessary, and everyone is in the right place and right mind to make that happen. And the studies are underway. It doesn't get to be done without studies and environmental review and permitting, but it's happening, and it's got funding, and it has consensus. And I'm being told by our transportation people short term, if we can get that done in 2 years, it would be great, and it would be miraculous. I know that sounds like a long time, but I know it's how things are. It's one of the most frustrating things about government. But 2 years for a major transportation project actually is pretty quick. And so we'll keep the heat on and make that happen as soon as we can. And they've done the modeling, they know it will make a big difference for our community here, for Sir Francis Drake specifically. Second thing is there's a project that's looking at the whole Sir Francis Drake corridor from 101 all the way through to Ross, and then I'm trying to get Ross piggybacked in there and San Anselmo as well, to look at how to more efficiently use the corridor. We do not have real estate to build more lanes and lay down more cement, and we don't want to either. So our roads infrastructure is what it is, and that's what we have to work with. So, but we can make it, can we use it more efficiently? Can it be restriped differently, different lane configurations? What can we do with the signal lights? Also, there's a lot of needs with regards to pedestrian and bicycle safety at the intersections. That all needs to be looked at and addressed, and that's happening right now. And there's also funding in place for both the study and improvements, and that's part of our Measure A transportation dollars. So that's a good project. And again, it's not a silver bullet, but it can help, and it's important. Third thing, and this is actually the project that I'm most happy about, and I've been working on in back channels for a while with some of my colleagues throughout Marin, and that's a county-wide coordinated school transit study. And we're looking at all the school districts with a focus, my emphasis on the corridors that are having the biggest congestion problems. We know that school-related traffic accounts for anywhere from 20 to 40% of morning traffic, depending on where you live. I'm guessing here in the Ross Valley we're in the 30 to 40% range. So this study is looking at where the populations of the students are, how they're getting to school. A lot of them are taking advantage of the Safe Routes program, and they're walking and biking to school, and there is some bus service, but it's limited. One of the things the studies look at is, should we bring back yellow bus school service? And I think it's going to tell us, yes, that it's probably a really good solution, especially for some areas. There will be a price tag associated with it. Right now, the bus service that's available for kids that's provided through Marin Transit is subsidized by Marin Transit, but the kids also do pay for a pass. And in the Ross Valley School District, the White Hill Middle School has about 500 kids out of 700 taking the bus to school every day, and they ride on these Marin Transit school routes. They're paying $350 each per person to ride on that bus. And it sounds like a lot of money, but when you do the math and you figure out the time, it's a good deal. Yellow school bus service could cost that much and or more. And the community may want to decide, may want to make a decision about if it's that important to them, do we subsidize it? So when we get there, we'll get there, but I think it's definitely the way to go, and I'm hoping the data shows us that, and then I'm hoping we get community support for that. Also on that study, they're going to look at everything from bell times. Can you change bell times to make traffic move better? Can you use bell times to, if you do have yellow school buses, to spread them out, use the same bus service for one school and then for another school because they're not opening and closing at the same time. So it's a comprehensive study. It's important. I've got my fingers crossed for this one. I think that's pretty much it for what I wanted to bring to your attention. There's a whole host of other things going on. Now I'd really, really love, and I'm sorry to have spoken 10 minutes longer than I meant to, from you. I want to hear from you. So questions, concerns, and around this or anything else.
Neil Park. I just had a question on the numbers. There were 773 units, the housing element, but they weren't used. They go back into inventory?
Yes.
So there is an inventory far greater than what the element provides, is that correct?
Yeah, so he's asking about that inventory, the inventory list, and technically, so now that 773, the sites for 773 units become like inventory. That doesn't need to be used anymore, used in terms of included in the housing element. So the sites still exist, whether or not they're in the housing element, but they're still there, yes. And and frankly, the idea with this update is not to try to turn over new rock to find new sites, because pretty much that's been done. It's like, what's part of the inventory, what makes sense for this housing element from the inventory that we've looked at in the past. Does that make sense?
Is there a number for the inventory? Do you have any idea of what would the inventory be in your district?
The only sites that were identified in the last housing element were the two that I mentioned, and they're being referred up to this next housing element. So the Oak Manor site and Cow Park. That makes sense. No, but and maybe this is what you're thinking about. When they did the 2007 to 2014 housing element, when they were doing the studies freehand to rock in the county, you know, what's out there. They looked at other sites, but none of those were included in the housing element or the sites in inventory. Most of them, a lot of them required rezoning, and we didn't want to do any rezoning. And that was really key, and in fact, I think that is, I'm pretty sure that's the case for anything that was in Kentfield Greenbrae. For instance, the sloped lot right over here, that's zoned single-family residential. I think it can take 2 homes. If someone were to want to develop it. It was looked at in the site inventory. In order to convert that to take more you'd have to rezone. So it was identified as underdeveloped, that had the potential if you wanted to rezone it for more development, but it was, you know, none of that happened. We didn't need it, no one wanted it, so that may be what you're referring to.
My name is Judy Messiner. I just don't understand why the county's housing element draft identifies so many more opportunities than the state requires. If they only require us to do 185, why are they coming up with 500 or 700?
So good question. And that was a planning commission decision. So the planning commissioners had deliberations about that. I'd have to go back and listen to I've read some of the transcripts. It sounded to me like there was a couple commissioners who felt like it was important to create some buffer or latitude to have more sites on the list than the minimum requirement, because actually that gives you some room something to work with when you get in terms of finalizing the draft. There were a couple commissioners who thought it was really important to include the St. Vincent Silvera site on the site list. And St. Vincent Silvera is that, you all know what St. Vincent Silvera is, the open land just north of San Rafael on the right-hand side, Derry. You all know what that is. That property back in 2007, prior to 2007, had been zoned for single-family residential for something like 5,000 units. And as part of the countywide plan update process in 2007, it was downzoned. And it was downzoned to allow for 121 senior affordable units and 100 market rate. And the countywide plan prescribes that that development would have to happen in a clustered area as opposed to spread over the 1,100 acres. And there were planning commissioners who felt it was important to include that site in the housing element list. So that added up 221 units to that. So that was another reason. I don't know, I'm not doing their thinking, they're doing their job. And they had different opinions. But the important thing now is it's their recommendation on the draft, and the Board of Supervisors gets input. And I don't have a crystal ball, as I said before, but I think that my colleagues are going to have likely different opinions of what that list should look like and whether we need to have the number that high and or include St. Vincent Silvera or anything else. So it's a work in progress, and that's important public input, and you can send an email or show up at the Planning Commission hearings or come to the Board of Supervisors and make that formal input, and I've also heard you here today. I'm trying to stick with Kentfield and Greenbrae residents. It's not personal.
Thanks, Dr. Crane. The traffic lights through Greenbrae have never been timed correctly, and that's what causes all the jams. Why can't they be timed like the ones on 3rd and 2nd Street in San Rafael, where you breeze right through?
Thanks, Basha. You're preaching to the choir. I agree. The only corridor that really seems to function well, in my experience in Marin County, is the San Rafael. Those lights are well synchronized. This is a secret, but I wouldn't tell this to my Public Works Department. But frankly, San Rafael has the staff and actually the most experience around signal lines and timing, but that's also because they've got the most signal lines in the county and lots of experience. But what you're talking about is exactly what that Sir Francis Drake corridor study is supposed to look at. The other thing that I'm pounding on and have my Public Works Director have asked him to bring to the other Public Works Directors in the county, and then I'm talking to my colleagues on the council, is we have to deal with traffic corridors together, comprehensively, not jurisdiction by jurisdiction. The Sir Francis Drake corridor demands that the county, Ross, San Anselmo, even Fairfax, probably should be using the same, should have a system that's talking to each other. So I'm asking, this is one of these cross-jurisdictional issues that should be dealt with in a cross-jurisdictional fashion. So signal light timing, really important, Kentfield Greenbrae, but I'd like it also to be something that we think about really in a corridor way, and I'm hoping that will happen. That will piggyback onto this Sir Francis Drake study that's happening.
Thank you. Larry Monsbach, Greenbrae resident, 1987. Sir Francis Drake corridor is very traffic congested. As you said, there's no capacity really to add lanes, add pavement. Yet over recent years, we've witnessed the expansion of major traffic generators, either underway or planned, particularly College of Marin and Marin General Hospital. Now, presumably there are environmental impact reports and traffic studies, but something's not adding up correctly. Where projects are being allowed to expand, they're adding traffic. What are these traffic studies, environmental impact reports saying?
So that's an excellent question, and I think that it reflects the experience that we all have in terms of reality and the studies. On specifically Marin General Hospital, there's a meeting coming up. When is it?
Okay, look, I'm Ann Thomas. I don't live in Kentfield, but I take the minutes for a group called the Kentfield Planning Advisory Board, and since you mentioned Marin General. The KPAB is an advisory group, and they make recommendations to the county. They are not decision-making. But they have been reviewing Marin General plans for about the past 4 years in preparation. As I hope everyone knows, Marin General is beginning a major expansion that would be built out in 6 phases over 8 years. And when completed, it would approximately double the size of the campus. It is going to increase traffic volumes and affect levels of service on our local roads. The KPAB, the Kentfield Planning Group, is reviewing at its next meeting this Wednesday, November 12th. It is going to be reviewing plans for the first phase, which is a design review for a 6-level parking structure and a new parking lot, a tree removal permit for the removal of 48 protected trees, and a temporary use permit for the construction buildings. These meetings are open to the public. You're welcome to attend. They're very informal, and it's an opportunity to look at plans and, offer comment, which would be on the record. for the county. I think the county planner for the project is going to be there Wednesday night, and he's very anxious to make sure the public knows this project is happening so you can be prepared for it. So thank you. If anyone here is interested in this project and just wants to be on the list to be notified of meetings, you could let me know. I know what your email is, and the KPAB will send out.
Where's the meeting?
College of Marin, in the student center, and thank you. KPAB also has openings for board members if you're from the Kentfield, Greenbrae area, and it is an important board, and they do great work, and they may only be advisory, but we listen very, very carefully. I do. I work closely with KPAB and with the chair, and so it's an important body, both for providing public input, discussing a project like Marin General, and then also in terms of the input I get from them. And we need people sitting in those seats to be examining this. So to add on to what Ann said, and your concern about what does the study do. So the environmental review study for the hospital, I argued for and advocated for and had Public Works put this into their comments and their requests for the hospital, that they have a really strong traffic demand management program for their employees. That's the primary traffic generator of patient traffic tends to be more spread out. It's really the employees that come in during our commute schedules, and the timing is difficult to change. I understand for hospitals, you come in on shifts. So traffic demand is really important, but it's only as good, it's a mitigation for traffic, only if it gets implemented. So it's my job to sit really hard on the hospital to make sure that happens. And then trying to, College of Marin is growing. That project is for the structure itself. I did ask, it is supposed to be finished in January. The administration building is supposed to be done in January of 2015. But per its growth student-wise, I am not sure how much, I don't have a handle on population. Maybe someone else here does, but they also they do have finite parking. It's one of the reasons that they don't expect ever to try to develop that lot that's in back lot 15 because they need parking. They also need to do a much better job on getting their students using public transit. And so I have Marin Transit trying to work with them constantly to create routes that serve their students better. Don't have any control over what the college does. They're governed by the State Board of Education. But that doesn't mean that I don't work with them, and actually that board, that College of Marin board, those are your representatives. We should be talking, you should be talking to them as well. It's important.
My name is Barbara Dolan, and I served on the college board for 28 years. There is something wrong here which is hard to put your finger on, but the process is not listening to the local input that is coming in. When you come before the board, or you come before planning commissioners, or you come before supervisors at the local level. And I would like to know why that is happening and what has gone wrong with a country that is supposed to elect people who serve us. And it seems just the opposite is happening. There is something very wrong here. I think we are at the heart of it. And the explanations, there's always a hope for another meeting. But the same process seems to kill whatever is said at the local level, and it never goes any higher than just that meeting. And it's like we don't exist. And we are a country for we, the people. The people that we elect are there to serve us, not us to serve them. Our dollars and our money are to go to elected officials who are willing to hear what we have to say and follow through. That is simply not happening. And I think there are people that are aware about this. I don't know the whole answer. So thank you for coming in and telling us what's going on. And good luck.
hard to feel like you're heard if you don't see your idea or your concern addressed. We have a lot of viewpoints in this community. I do the best job I can possible to listen to the community, and in the end I end up having to make decisions sometimes. Almost every time I make a decision. Every time I make a decision. Every vote cast. It may be, there may be shades of gray, maybe 40-60 one way or the other, but once I cast a vote, it's black or white and someone's disappointed, and it's one of the most difficult things about this job. But I do listen, Barbara, and I do think and credit the community with a lot of sensitivity to what their community needs, and frankly, they know their community's best.
Hi, I do appreciate what you have done so far. You really have responded. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Barbara Geisler. And I had a suggestion, and I don't know whether it would work. But if we reinstituted tolls on the Golden Gate Bridge that charged in both ways, I believe there would not be such an incentive for the number of people who are coming from the East Bay. There's such technology, I don't think it would be hard to do. And so that would be my suggestion. Another suggestion, if you can, to answer Barbara's thought, can we make it so that we elect people on ABAG, that we elect people on the Planning Commission? These are people that you are appointing, but I think it would be much more democratic if we did.
Okay, so thank you, Barbara. So can we elect people to ABAG or the Planning Commission or whatever other bodies? And I would have to say I don't see why you can't change the legislation around something, especially at the community level, to make them elected positions. I would have to do some thinking about that in a big way around our boards and commissions if it really makes sense. Frankly, I see the Planning Commission as having the ability to really, our Planning Commission, and your Planning Commissions that are in your cities and towns as well. Those individuals don't have to respond to political pressure. They actually get to, because they're not elected, they actually get to really dive down and analyze, and if they're good appointments, and there's a good balance on that board, you get varied viewpoints and you get the benefit of their expertise and their analysis without it being pressured by political motivations or political factions. So there's actually some good sides to not being an elected official serving on a board like that. I hear what you're saying. ABAG is the legislation that created ABAG goes back to the 50s and created its structure. So that tells me, as a lay government person, that you can always create legislation that changes the way that body is created. I can see pluses and minuses to that being an elected board, but I suppose it could be done. It would not be, I'm on the ABAG board right now. I've sat on it since 2013 and I was appointed. I did not select to be on ABAG. Just so you know, I'm also coming off of ABAG at the end of this year, and I'm going to be filling Susan Adams' seat on the Air Board, on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. But it's something to think about. Do you change the Air Board, MTC, ABAG to be elected positions? I'm sure there's mechanisms that could make that happen, and it's a matter of, does that a community, do I want to use my energy? Do you want to use your energy to make that happen? Is that the what's important to this community, or are there other issues we want to focus on? So that would be my response to that. The first question that Barbara brought up, wait, what was it? What was the first one? Tolls, great idea. So as part of that, a part of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, part of what they actually are going to have to look at while they're doing the physical, they have to make the physical improvements and get the permitting for that. They also have to look at the traffic modeling. And that means thinking about how the bridge tolls and the directions are working, and what happens at Golden Gate. The Golden Gate Bridge does inform the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, right? In fact, they're all, that's another, the Bay Area is linked, our traffic patterns linked. So that is being looked at, and I appreciate the reminder because I'm going to remind my colleagues who sit on the bridge board to find out what's going on with that. And if it's not an answer, show us the data as to why. And it may, there may be an unintended consequence that we're not aware of. You can, if you do it, yes. If you do it right, you don't have to pay a toll, but you may have to pay a toll in terms of traffic congestion. So there's trade-offs. Anyway, who else? Over here, Josh.
Thank you, Katie. Josh Raffner. Another subject. We want to be in a safe and secure area. But from time to time, we've had some issues with safety, and I see we have our sheriff's department and our fire officials here, so I'd really welcome a quick update if you don't mind changing the subject.
I'm sorry, guys. So I meant to, when I was over with Barbara, seeing Sheriff over there, to make note that we've got the Central Marin Police Authority here. We have deputies from the Sheriff's Department. And do we have CHP here? I think we have CHP. So anyway, Josh is asking for a quick update on crime, law enforcement stuff, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to do that. Maybe you guys are up front. Someone from the sheriff come up too?
Hello. Hi, I'm Detective Ryan Serkio with the Central Marin Police.
Hold on.
Sorry. Okay. I'm Ryan Serkio with the Central Marin Police Authority. I currently work in the Investigations Division. Obviously, most of you know that we cover parts of the Greenbrae area. As far as crime statistics, we've been going over very thoroughly with Bear Analytics and a number of other programs. As far as crime levels are concerned, at least in our jurisdiction, they remain pretty average, comparatively speaking, over the last year. We've looked recently over the past 6 months, and statistically speaking, it's remained relatively the same. I can't speak on behalf of Kenfield, but the rest of the Greenbrae, maybe the sheriff's deputies can do that.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Dior from the Sheriff's Department. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Dior from the Sheriff's Department, and I work in investigations. And as far as crime in Kenfield and Greenbrae, for the last 6 months, we've had a total of 34 burglaries and thefts. And compared to the 6 months prior to that, it was 32. So it's roughly about the same. So I don't know if you guys got any questions want to ask me about that, or
what kind of burglaries are we talking about?
So in the last 6 months, or the recent 6 months here, we've had 16 residential burglaries, and the majority of those, it seems like they're due to having unlocked windows and or doors. There's a couple of them that windows have been broken or doors have been kicked in, but the majority of them are unlocked residences. And then the petty thefts are mostly like, it seems like bicycles taken from carports, or stuff that's left out like that. There's been a few auto burglaries. Obviously, we recommend don't keep stuff in your cars in plain sight, like purses and computers. That's typically what they go after. A lot of people tend to keep them in their backseat or on the floorboard. And, someone looks at the window, sees it, will definitely break the window to try to get those. So.
Gotcha. Got it?
All right, thank you guys. So the Central Marin Police Authority and the Sheriff's Department work together. They share jurisdiction. They've got, a line, I don't know where the line is exactly, between City of Larkspur, Greenbrae, and the county, can't remember the street name, but they do work together and they respond to calls, through mutual aid, and there's some really good tools on Central Marin's website, and I believe it's on the Sheriff's website as well now, that show, you can add their scattergrams of what's happening, calls that are made, and it's really important that you report any crimes. Bike off the porch, purse stolen out of the car, do report it because it gives law enforcement an idea of the activity areas, and then that's where they focus their attention and energy. So sounds like status quo. Status quo is great because it's still crime, Josh. But it seems to be at a level place. A year or two ago, it seemed like there was sort of a spike. But bottom line, we got to do our best as residents and homeowners and car owners to not make it easy and attractive for people to break in.
Hi, my name is Pam Drew, and I'm interested in the question of the restriping to the Richmond Bridge in a 2-year time frame. If everybody knows that out of $70 million, 3/4 of that is going to bike lane, and the delays, the vast majority of the delays is because of the bike lane. Would it be possible to get it decoupled so that the striping for the third lane could go ahead as soon as possible? That's really a high priority because we have a tsunami of traffic coming in from Napa and Sonoma and all parts north.
So good question, and thank you for bringing that up. So the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge project, that third lane, it's not just a matter of opening up the third lane, which will still require some engineering and striping and permitting. But we also have to deal with, there's a second part, and actually 3 parts. There are construction, there is right now some bike and ped infrastructure on the Contra Costa side of the bridge that serves both the folks that work there and also bike and ped people, I guess. It has to be moved, it has to be relocated in order to create that third lane. So that has to be dealt with. If we don't, state law says you may not remove one path of travel for one user group without replacing it in some way. Saying it's the law. So required by state law to deal with the situation that does require construction and I think retaining walls and stuff on the east side of the bridge. Can't be decoupled, the question was asked. I asked the question, can we just do the third lane on an emergency basis, make it an emergency measure? Because oftentimes, disaster emergencies, you get a hall pass at some of the requirements, and the answer is no, Caltrans would not allow this project to proceed third lane on its own without dealing with the bike ped issues on the east side, and also there's a third part of the project that is to create a 2-way bike lane on the upper deck. It doesn't have to happen at the same time, but there is planning around it. I'm being told it's not slowing the pace of this project. There's a perception that it is. I've asked twice, I've asked for workarounds. There's no workarounds. They're telling me that it isn't. What's holding up, the holding up is permitting process, because you have to go through environmental review. You have to get permits from the resource agencies. There is design and there is construction. 2-year time frame is what we're shooting for.
Thank you, Katie. Brendan Fogarty, Greenbrae. Katie, it's my understanding that Marin Catholic is going to try to bring its version of Friday Night Lights, a Texas tradition, to the Ross Valley. And have you considered the severe impact that will have on this corridor, which is currently being worked on, and the plan is supposed to be in place by 2017? And do you expect that to entail an environmental impact report? Thank you.
So Brendan Fogarty, Greenbrae community member, and also served on the Greenbrae Property Owners Association board for many years, and then on the CSA 16 board. So thank you, Brendan, for all that work. There's not a proposal at the county. I know there was talk of it when a couple years ago with the stadium improvements. There was both the sound, they wanted to make improvements, do the sound system and do lights. They pulled lights off of that proposal. I would anticipate they would bring, it makes sense that they would try to do lights again. I don't know if it will entail an environmental, if CEQA, if it'll have to go through a full CEQA process. I just don't know the answer to that question, but I can ask, and I'll get back to you on that. And I expect it will be a divisive issue for the community. There's going to be folks on both sides of lights. You're going to have community members who be very excited to have night ball games there, and there's going to be some who aren't, as was the case with the sound. So I expect you're going to have a deep community conversation. KPAB will probably be hosting some meetings. I'll be listening. I don't have an opinion. I want to make sure that it goes through the process right, and then in the end it's a community decision. But if that's, I don't know when in the future that's coming, but it will have to go through whatever process, the rigorous process it's supposed to, and the community process.
Oh, good. I think I'm speaking for a number of people that are in this room. It goes back to the issue of Clayton Smith. I live in Belleville.
It's from my home. My native.
Yes. Okay. I think I'm speaking for a number of people that are in this room concerning the Larry Bragman election and the suspicions that under the current regime where our registrar of voters is appointed, that there are questions as to the efficacy of what might come out of this election. I think there were questions about Tony Schroyer when we have these very close elections. There's a lot of questions that she might be Kinsey's creature, and I think there is a possible suspicion of conflict of interest, given the fact that the person who is the object of this controversy is also a Kinsey creature, which is his staff member. Now, earlier this year, I had a meeting with the my group up in Sonoma, hosted a meeting with the registrar of voters for Sonoma County. And it was an interesting topic there, was their registrar of voters is elected by the people. And this I really found interesting. I'd never really thought about the issue. It goes a long way towards giving at least a sense of accountability direct to the electorate as to the independence of that person. And there perhaps this might be a way of actually creating a greater sense that we have more honesty here in these elections, because I think there's great suspicion of it now. So I would like to suggest for the Board of Supervisors to bring up as a topic of conversation this issue of having a directly elected registrar of voters that would give us a greater sense that we would have transparency and honesty in our elections. And I also would like to ask one other thing. I would like to make sure that we have a chance to have some supervision, some transparency over this count, because I think there's something that seems very
good. So regardless of the outcome of this vote, and it's going to be close, I'm not sure it's going to shift over time, but it's going to be a close count. So you would be asking the same thing whether Larry wins or Lisa wins. Your suspicions, would you have suspicions either way?
No, my suspicions are not in that direction, but my recommendation is regardless as to who wins.
All right. Okay, so I agree. So one, I'm going to disagree with the premise that the assumption that there's something shady going on. I have more respect for the people that work in elections than that. But I would expect any close and any controversial, but any close race, there are mechanisms in place that allow people to challenge the vote and ask for a recount. And it's very transparent. You can go in and watch the counting. There's tools in place. I think it's a little bit irresponsible without having true evidence that there's a problem there to be talking that way, frankly. But let's see how the vote goes, and then I suspect there will be a recount if it's really close, and or if somebody's not happy with the and wants to challenge it. Those things are in place. And then with regards to should the registrar of voters be an elected position, I'm not sure that that's a big community movement. It hasn't been a problem, and I haven't seen corruption or bad things happen. She's not Kinsey's gal. You know, we hired her, we made a decision as a board on who we hire as department heads. If that ends up being something the committee wants to turn the registrar of voters into an elected position, then I'll listen to the broader community on that and consider it.
I'm Alan Berlin. My great concern is regardless of the striking of the lanes on Sir Francis Drake, it's going to be blown out of the water when the Larkspur Station project is built. Now, we seem to be mollified by the fact that now they've taken the issue and they've denied the adoption of the draft EIR, which is credible. We said that, well, we have traffic problems which conflict with our general plan, and we've got sea level rise which conflict with our general plan. And so what they've done is they pulled the project and they've said to their people, we have a citizens committee and we need to change the general plan. So it doesn't comply with the rules, so we changed the rules. That's how they propose to mitigate the project. Now it seems to me with the aggressive action of Larkspur in annexing tax base in the Ross Valley and the relaxation of all the projects in the Ross Valley which don't affect their residents, I think it's a safe bet to say that the Citizens Committee will recommend and the City Council will adopt policies which would allow for a somewhat smaller project, but still a massive project of perhaps 500 or 600 units. And this would just kill the Sir Francis Drake.
So I see. Kevin, would you mind talking about what the process is for the Larkspur? Am I putting you on the spot? Okay, so Kevin Harris here, he's a Larkspur City Council member. Are you also a Greenbrae resident? And a Greenbrae resident, and he is closer to the process of the Larkspur Station Area Plan. It's my perception, and having spoken on behalf of the community and going to those Larkspur Station Area Plan meetings, that the council certainly did listen to the community and agreed with your concerns. But Kevin, can you update us on the process going forward?
Yeah, sure. There is no process going forward. The Larkspur Station Area Plan is dead, period. We will be going through an overall process to look at the general plan as it applies throughout Marin, throughout the city of Larkspur, because we have to do that from time to time. But there is no thought that I'm aware of to focus on Larkspur Landing, to do anything there that's other than just part of our overall revisiting our general plan. As I said, the Larkspur Station Area Plan proposals are dead. The environmental review documents that were prepared for that were flawed, fundamentally flawed. For those of you who participated in some of the meetings that we had last summer, you heard my views about that. I think we had the right outcome. So I don't see us revisiting in any.
And I would also say that that was another, I think, demonstration of electeds listening to their community. And it wasn't just listening, it was listening to the community and doing their homework. And so don't think that your voice isn't heard. Your voice is heard. Voices are heard. And it's really important to be voicing them.
Steve Carpellini, I live in Corte Madera. I'm just wondering, do you know, is it part of the plan when they reopen the third lane on the Richmond Bridge to also add a third lane on the west end to 580 so that there would be a direct lane going from Sir Francis Drake to the new third lane and eliminate the merge that causes the bog down on Sir Francis Drake?
Can you say that?
Sure. Right now there are two lanes that go from Highway 101 to the Richmond Bridge, which is part of 580. And the traffic from Sir Francis Drake has to merge into the right lane of those two. When they open a third lane on the bridge, it would have much more effect if there is then a new third lane on 580 so that merge doesn't happen.
Yeah, creating the third lane all the way from the Sir Francis Drake merge. From that point, that's where the project starts, I think, as scoped right now. And I'll confirm that in a follow-up. Nancy, you got that? Nancy's catching all these things I need to get back to him. So Steve, I'm pretty sure, I got it in my papers, but I don't want to dig through right now, but it's from where Sir Francis Drake merges on to the on-ramp all the way across, so 3 lanes from there.
Bill Rostenberg from Greenbrae. I've spent a fair amount of time trying to understand all the numbers from ABAG and from the state. They quite frankly are a bit of a numbers game, are not only confusing but often suspect, and in the past have just been wrong. My question is, in the name of simplicity, would you support a county-wide policy that challenges any mandated development until traffic is corrected, so that rather than having Larkspur, Port Madeira, Kentfield, Santa meetings, where sometimes the citizens are heard, and I think it's great when they are, we don't have to spend all this time debating this until we can actually experience traffic that's not a problem, and then we can vote on whether or not we want to have development that further might worsen it. Now, I have one other question, which is about College of Marin. While there's a lot of development here in Kentfield, there seems to be an extremely underutilized campus in Indian Valley. And I'm just wondering, what is the grand plan of how that organization uses 2 different resources in the best way?
Is anybody from the College of Marin board here? Okay, and I can't, so on College of Marin, I can't give you the answer of what the strategy is between the 2 campuses. But I will have somebody from the board follow up with you. On the county adopted policy that says no more development, no more mandated development until the traffic issues are addressed. There is no mandated development, so it's a regulation looking for a problem. There's a perception of mandated development, but there is no mandated development. No, they're not unnecessary because it's important to understand what's going on, and frankly, are how the numbers that you talked about coming down from the house, from ACD through ABAG in terms of what we're supposed to plan for or show that we can accommodate in terms of new housing. Those numbers changed because of community input and pushback and questioning of, are those numbers realistic and appropriate? So that's why it's good to have public meetings to talk about this stuff. And secondly, I think that the whole Plan Bay Area conversation, the Plan Bay Area is considered to have been a negative somehow for Marin County, but when you look at where now the emphasis for dollars going to support growth in the Bay Area, and where probably the growth is going to occur in the Bay Area because it's where the communities want it, it's away from Marin. Our expectations for growth are very low. We don't have to build anything, but even our expectations are low. The conversations are important because we should be talking about housing, and we should be talking about traffic, and we should be understanding if and how they're linked. And then we also need to be talking about, as communities, should we be looking for opportunities to create housing for our community? Do we want to or not? I would suggest that we should be having more conversations about expansion of commercial and retail development because frankly, that's been one of the drivers of our traffic problems. So meetings like this and any other meetings are all important whether we're dealing with the same set of facts or not. The important things we're having conversations about issues that impact all of us.
Thank you very much. I think that, oh, sure. Valerie Hood, I'm living in Fairfax, and I work sort of the upstream and affect everything that happens where we live and just goes downstream. And one of the things I really hope the supervisors might do to get their credibility back would be to have, say, a moratorium on housing until the drought is over because we don't have water, we're maxed out. Another thing is, I think there's 2 places that actually were rezoned, and I'm incorporated Fairfax, and our town staff said they were never even told about this, even though it has a negative impact on Fairfax, and one is the Sunnyside Growing Grounds, besides the development at Oak Manor, really important. Another thing is that I would hope that the Board of Supervisors would consider taking out the $100,000 a year as part of the so-called affordable housing, because really when you factor in $100,000 a year income, it puts affordable housing right out of the ball field for anybody who's actually workforce wage sort of thing. Another part is that as of 5 or 6 years ago, 50% of the traffic that comes, according to the Marin Bicycle Coalition, that comes through Fairfax is coming off of the gridlock freeway in Novato, and I'm sure those numbers have only increased. And we really haven't talked about that, and you guys could have you could really help with that, I think. Another part is where you claim that we're built out, but then why does Supervisor Kinsey and Jerry Huffman talk about putting a new housing development basically at San Quentin? That whole promotion was really scary to me. We're talking about not just housing, but we're also talking about a big infrastructure. So thank you.
And I may not remember them all. San Quentin, developing San Quentin is not something we need to worry about in our lifetime. So I think I can say, when Steve Kinsey has talked about visioning forward for the San Quentin site 50 years out. San Quentin, to shut it down, to clean it up, to deal with that property is going to take decades. And I think it's a red herring if it's something you want to be worried about. I don't think it's something we need to be really worried about right now. I think that when it comes time to be talking about and planning for that area, I think there's a lot of potential opportunity for great coastal public access. And maybe there's some housing opportunity because maybe in 20 or 30 years, the ferry system is so efficient that it works. But I think it's not something we need to worry about now at all. It's going to be a super fun site to clean up San Quentin if it ever shuts down, and it's not going to happen too quickly. Going back, traffic from Sunnyside. I'm going to do Sunnyside first. Sunnyside's not been rezoned. It has not. I checked last week. Question came up. Same zoning's in place. It's single-family residential. I don't know how big it is, and I'm not sure. But it's commercial. It's commercial. It's not zoned for housing. I thought it was single-family residential. And if it was single-family residential, it would be at a very low zoning. But it has not been rezoned. So whatever's existing and has been existing there in terms of zoning remains in place. And but I'm really sorry that it's going to be closing. So sounds good. Okay, traffic from Novato. Those are people needing to get to Marin County to work, or maybe even through Marin County to San Francisco. They're coming. It's a free country. They choose the path of least resistance. I'd say there's. I don't know that that's always a great path of travel. The whole opening of the Novato Narrows and that work there in terms of freeway improvements is to address, to try to create some congestion relief. Hopefully it will work. There's more gaps to fill, but it's people taking what they see as the easiest path, and we can't prevent them from coming the back way through Novato. So one more, Val, you had a couple more really quick ones. Water moratorium. Board of Supervisors could put a moratorium on hookups. I think we could. We could stop issuing permits. Not hookups are for water. That's through the Marin Municipal Water Board. And I actually think that the better question, the bigger question is, under what conditions will the Marin Water Board impose a moratorium like we did back in 1976? And at that time, I was 16 and my mom was president and was sitting on the water board, so I'm pretty familiar with what happened back there. And there was two things that happened. There was a moratorium on water hookups, which is in its essence a moratorium on building. And there was rationing put in place, and we were rationed at 37 gallons per person per day at that time. So right now, I think it's not voluntary. I think we're being asked, it's not rationing, but we're being asked to cut back by 20%. But what the water board is going to have to determine if this winter doesn't start to shape up into something is when, if and when to impose rationing, and I would assume at the same time they would do hookups. It's not a question, no? Okay, so there's triggers, right? So there's triggers on there. They have policy in place that has triggers around water supply, but I would say it's two parts. It's not just no growth in dealing with the drought. It's also us having to deal with consumption. And I'm going to add, and I'm going to say something about water, just so you all know where I stand on this. I believe that we are so fortunate to have the water, the reservoir system we have, and the water supply that we have. But it is a finite supply, and actually water is a finite supply. It's a finite resource wherever you live. We have been lucky that we can depend on our own resource. But regardless of how many people live here, and frankly, we could have a drought that lasts 3 or 4 or more years, and it doesn't matter if there was half the population here, we would run into water problems. We need to find a way to expand our water supply. And that, in my mind, is going to be primarily, should be around continuing our conservation efforts, but also really starting to use the technology that's out there to use reclaimed water, using the water that we have much more efficiently. And we're not doing nearly what we should be doing. And it's something that I know the board is looking into, and it's also something we should be looking into as a community in terms of supporting some of the technologies out there that could make us even much more self-reliant and self-sufficient, even in terms of longer-term droughts. Okay, it's 11. Oh, now you're all excited. Jack. Okay, it's 11. It's 11:30, so I'm going to do Jack, quick question, and then over to Liz. And then we'll close. The phone ring right when you pick up. Murphy's Law.
Jack Crystal, I've lived in this community, Ross, Fred Hart, for 40 years. Our home has been occupied by 6 people, downsizing down to 3 now, with a daughter that finds that the rent that dad charges is a lot less than what you can find somewhere else. And the demographics are changing. Your district, 40,000 people, 50 or more. And I think we've all noticed a tremendous amount of remodeling, renovation, upgrading going on. And what I think a lot of us, the 50,000, in addition to people present here, are looking at is we're changing. Our needs are changing. People are looking at moving out and selling their places simply because there's not other alternatives available. We have read about the schism in Fairfax, and what I'm leading to is how are you and the board, especially you in this district, looking at the fact that elderly people, senior people, their needs right now and in the years to come will be on driving less and having housing near the commercial areas, near the hospital, near and outside of the single family. In other words, how will you and the board handle the fact that there is an underlying growing need for housing.
Thank you very much, Jack. So that's the senior population, one segment of the population that we're not able to accommodate. And tell a quick story, and then to Liz. So I was at Drake High School a couple weeks ago. Was invited to speak to 3 classes of seniors in their government class. My daughter's a senior at Drake, and I'm sure she got extra credit for that. Anyway, Monday morning after homecoming, 8 o'clock in the morning, the first of 3 classes of 17/18-year-olds sitting in undersized desks and chairs staring at me. I was actually more nervous going into those classes. So anyway, I asked, trying to engage these kids, I said, what do you think are the biggest issues in Marin County? What do you think are the biggest issues that maybe government's dealing with or we're having? Traffic, congestion. Yeah. Second guy raised his hand. Housing. There's not enough housing. I said, I keep paying attention. And I said, well, why do you bring that up? And he goes, well, yeah, I've been thinking about it. And he'd also been doing some research. But I said, well, so what do you think? Do you think you're going to be able to come back and live here in Marin County after you go off to college? And he said, well, I will, because I'm going to kick my folks out of their home and they're to live in a nursing home. And I said, well, fashion fellow. I said, that's a good plan. I said, especially if you get your parents to cooperate. I said, but it's a lot more likely that your parents will be living with you if you are back in your house, because there's nowhere for them to go in Marin County. We are not taking care of our needs for our most vulnerable populations, for our seniors, let alone for our workforce. We are not going to satisfy all the needs. What I'm doing, in whatever way I can, is one, to support efforts towards creating housing, like senior housing, and there's a great project, hopefully, that will move in Fairfax called Peace Village, and it's a senior housing complex right adjacent to a school there in Fairfax. Beautiful project, close to town, small units, relatively affordable. Those are the kinds of opportunities and efforts I hope the community will get behind. We need property owners to be willing to do things like that, and developers. They have to pass the scrutiny of the communities, but we have a lot of opportunity for actually projects even much smaller than that that can help meet community needs. But there has to be a will, there has to be people willing to spend the money, there has to be a willing property owner, and there has to be community support. But I've heard from many folks, no one's against affordable housing or trying to create housing for the most needy. So we actually have to find ways to make that happen in our community at a scale, in character, and in the right places so it fits. And I'll continue to support those efforts, and I also continue to support a reasonable conversation around housing and affordable housing, so that we're not just saying no to everything without really thinking about what our community needs now and in the future. Last one, Liz Schott.
I'm superintendent of schools here in Kentfield, and I wanted to say 3 quick things, sorry. One is, no, I don't live here, but I am a native daughter. I now live in Sonoma County, and I sometimes take the back roads, sorry. But I'd like to also recognize and thank Paul Miller, our Director of Maintenance, who set up for this morning's meeting and is here. Doing a great job as always. Second thing is, I'd like to thank you so much for supporting our school district with Measure D last Tuesday. Measure D is our $30 million bond that will help us address the wild popularity of our school district and our overcrowding. It is a multi-year project, obviously, and there are a couple of ways that I invite you to think about getting involved. One is we have our master planning process kicking off. You can find out about that on our website at kentfieldschools.org, or give a call and ask for me at the district office, and I'll be happy to speak with you about ways you can become involved in our planning. The other is there will be a bond oversight committee that will be forming once we begin spending the money, and you can also contact me about ways to become involved in that.
Thirdly, we are acutely aware of and chronically guilt-ridden about the way we contribute to the traffic in this area. And while our children don't drive, they obviously some are driven, partly because there are no sidewalks in Greenbrae and it's a little dangerous to walk to school. We do have a nationally recognized Safe Route to School program that is doing a yeoman's job in getting people out of cars and off to our campuses. But we are actively participating in the transportation study that Katie referenced earlier to see how we might be able to get more get buses back. Yellow buses are iconic and darling, and we would like to have lots of kids on them. So we wanted you to know that we're also very committed to that process. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you for sticking through, for being here, for staying, for sharing your thoughts, asking your questions if you have any more. And please fill out that orange sheet about communications. And to help our great facilities person, if you could grab, if you're able to fold up a chair and grab it and bring it over to the back, let's give him a hand. Sheriff, Central Marin Police, everyone, thank you for being here. Many thanks, you guys. Have a